The story begins with a lost astronaut trying to communicate with the control tower. He states that he should have landed in New Mexico, and it's obvious that this didn't happen, as the landscape is totally different, plus there are 3 moons in the sky. When something starts to roar threateningly, the astronaut pleads for someone to respond and attempts to flee the danger by running. He stumbles, and as he gets up, he lets out a scream of terror when he comes face to face with a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Then we meet Dr. Rick Marshall, a specialist in quantum paleontology who is being interviewed by Matt Lauer. His solution to the fuel crisis is a mix of time travel and visits to parallel universes. Matt is shocked to learn that this nonsense has already consumed $50 million of public funds. Besides being rude, Rick doesn't answer the questions properly and limits himself to shamelessly promoting his latest book. When Matt mentions critics of the research, starting with the esteemed physicist Stephen Hawking, Rick loses his composure. He stands up in anger as if he's leaving, then runs back to attack the host and has to be restrained by the crew. 3 years later, Rick is presenting his grand invention, the tachyon amplifier. Using the high speed of these particles, the machine can transport the passenger to a parallel reality where past, present, and future mix. Only when the speech ends do we discover he is speaking to children. Rick has been working as a science teacher since his career imploded during that interview. Today, a woman named Holly Cantrell comes to talk to him after class, introducing herself as a big fan of his work and stating that a tachyon amplifier needs to be built as soon as possible. Rick rejects the idea, saying that those theories ruined his life. But then she shows him a rock that is over 200 million years old. Inexplicably, the stone is marked with the unmistakable silhouette of a modern-day lighter. Holly says she found it in the same place where she collected crystals that emit tachyon energy. The next day, she returns to apologize for her intrusion and finds the professor in a deplorable state. However, she soon discovers that this is all a result of a sleepless night, as Rick has finally finished building the amplifier. He admits the achievement but confesses that he hasn't had the courage to test it yet. Much more businesslike than her idol, Holly decides that they will test it the same day. But not there, in the midst of the mess and pizza leftovers. She takes Rick to the place where she found those objects, the Cave of Mysteries, an attraction in an old amusement park. The downside is that the owner, Will, is still around. In addition to charging for visits, he desperately tries to sell some of his horrendous products. It's all in pursuit of his dream, which is to build a tasteless casino. Leaving a guy named Ernie to tend the shop, Will takes the 2 customers on a tour inside the cave. Firm in their scientific purposes, they do their best to endure Will's antics as a tour guide. The first mystery presented is the legend of the Lizard Man, who supposedly attacks his victims since the colonization of the Americas. It doesn't take long for the creature to appear, in the form of a ridiculous puppet that breaks within 2 seconds. Will gets irritated with the failure and starts complaining about the apathy of the customers, but Rick isn't even listening. His devices have picked up a massive amount of tachyons, inspiring him to start the tests. The whole cave begins to shake, and water gushes with much more force, dragging the boat toward a waterfall that Will insists wasn't there before. The 3 plunge from the top toward a blue light and lose consciousness. Sometime later, Rick wakes up with his face in the sand, and Will is regaining consciousness. Holly has been up for a while and is already exploring the surroundings, amazed by what she sees. Right in front of her is a Cessna plane crashed on top of a Viking ship. The first thing Rick does is record a video documenting his victory, stating that Matt Lauer was wrong. Poor Will tries to understand what happened while listening to him and gets nervous when Rick mentions a concerning detail. The amplifier seems to have vanished, and it is the only way back home. Hearing the sound of growls and footsteps, the 3 crouch down to observe what Holly identifies as a group of primates. Seeing that one of them is about to attack the other, she decides to intervene and provokes a curious encounter. Will seizes the opportunity and immediately pulls out a lighter, intending to dominate this species through advanced technology. However, he ends up burning his finger and drops the lighter, which is quickly stolen by one of the primates. The shyer one is still hiding behind a rock, and Holly attempts to communicate with him, discovering that his name is Shaka. Rick notices that he has an injured ankle and decides to help him, but he doesn't have much tact. Shaka lunges at him and then flees, with the 3 chasing after him. They all end up falling into a hole and find themselves in a real cave this time. Upset by the rejection, Rick asks Holly to talk to the primate and intercede on his behalf. Not knowing how to express a middle ground, she says that Rick is the respectable leader of the tribe, and Shaka clings to his leg, offering his loyalty. Then, they are attacked by vines that seem to have a life of their own, grabbing each one by the waist. Hanging from a branch, They panic when they look down and see that the ground is covered with the remains of previous victims. The hungry growling completes the explanation, and Rick says that this place can only be a dining hall for some beast. Holding hands, they struggle to gain momentum and try to escape. The idea might have worked if the dinosaur hadn't arrived right in the middle of their aerial ballet. Luckily, it snaps up the vines, inadvertently freeing all four. Holly decides to take a photo of the Tyrannosaurus and asks Will to pose next to it for size reference. This significantly delays their escape, and Shaka doesn't wait for anyone. To the dismay of his new master, he crosses a bridge and then tries to destroy it, clearly thinking of leaving the clumsy group behind. Still, they all manage to make it in time and safely cross. The dinosaur stops at the edge, and Rick explains to the others that he is too stupid to cross the bridge, but in reality, he is just gaining momentum before leaping over to reach them. The chase continues until they reach a hole in the side of the mountain. Although it doesn't reach them, the beast spits liters of saliva all over them before moving on. Not the least bit shaken, Holly nicknames the dinosaur Grumpy. Now that the danger has passed, she returns to her exploratory spirit and declares that they must be the first humans to visit this world. However, a phonograph playing English songs and two uniformed skeletons prove that this is not true. Discovering that the hole is the entrance to a cave, the trio decides to spend the night there. Rick starts to poke fun at Shaka, suspecting that the episode with the vine might have been a punishment for something he did. Holly once again has to translate. Shaka explains that he is a prince full of love and his only sin was relieving himself in the village well. Rick says that's enough to get him kicked out of their cave. However, the primate has already won over the other two, and Will even says that he is cute. Rick and Will also disagree about defense strategies, as Will wants to protect the shelter from the Tyrannosaurus, and Rick insists that the creature is too stupid to remember where the cave is. When he says that its brain is the size of a walnut, violent thuds begin to shake the cave and then stop abruptly. The three arm themselves as best they can to approach the entrance and find a sort of gift. Removing the wrapping leaves, Rick is dumbfounded to see what a walnut looks like in this world. The next day, Will brings fruits for everyone, and Rick questions whether it's safe to eat them. Shaka indicates that it is and offers one to his master, but when the fruit breaks open, dozens of insects come out of it. Rick is outraged but sees that it was not meant to be malicious, as Shaka eats the insects without issue. The conversation is interrupted by a bright light coming from outside. Through the binoculars, Holly sees what appears to be a beam of energy. Then Rick is struck by a sudden pain in his head and has visions of a creature asking for help. Coming out of the trance, he decides to search for this being that communicated with him, heading toward the source of the beam. Holly admires the uniqueness of the architecture, and even Will is impressed, but Shaka seems very distressed. In the center of the arena, there is an object that looks like a glass pyramid, and Will places his hands on the surface, saying that the vibrations are strong. Rick tells him he shouldn't touch it, but soon feels envious and mimics him. In response, Shaka loses his cool and starts howling at the two. Not even Holly understands the message this time, even when he drops the attempted language and imitates a monster. It is then that the creatures known as sleet stacks begin to emerge from their burrows, which are everywhere. Surrounded, the three prepare for battle when Rick notices the arrangement of the statues in the corners of the arena. Taking a mirror from Holly, he bounces the beam of light off the eyes of all of them until it hits the pyramid, opening a secret passage. The sleet stacks seem unable to follow them inside, where there is an incredibly larger space than expected or possible. The creature that called Rick is lying on the ground. Its name is Enik, and he says that Rick needs to help him defend his species from a maniac named Zarn. After tyrannizing various planets with the power of crystals and his army of sleet stacks, he now plans to conquer Earth. Rick feels proud of the mission but is already getting scolded when he tries to touch the crystals. Enik explains that incorrect manipulation could have catastrophic consequences for the entire universe. Zarn himself has not turned everything to dust only because he still lacks one thing, a device capable of amplifying tachyons, thus unleashing the full power of the crystals. Rick says he has a machine like that, but unfortunately, he lost it during the trip. Enik says that the machine is nearby because he is detecting its signals. However, for some reason, the location is unstable, as if the amplifier is on the move. Rick volunteers to go hunting for his own invention and even prepares a model of the region to explain the plan to his friends. His lesson is interrupted by the dinosaur growling very close, but Rick is unfazed, always ready to underestimate the enemy. He explains to Will that these reptiles have a very keen sense of smell and that extreme measures will be necessary. Showing that he spent the night collecting urine from other dinosaurs, he disgusts the other two by pouring the gallon over himself. The effects are so severe that even he agrees to give up his entire plan when Shaka gestures for them to follow him. He leads them to an area where the tachyon energy seems to be out of control, judging by the various terrestrial junk scattered around. Will even sees his own boat, which fell from the waterfall with the three of them. But before he can retrieve it, an ice cream truck collapses right at that spot. Several dinosaurs attack the vehicle, and the poor ice cream man struggles to meet the demand but ends up being devoured too. When the Tyrannosaurus arrives, Rick explains that there is nothing to fear because an Allosaurus is approaching, and nothing would distract them from this titan duel. Of course, the two immediately look in their direction and decide to team up to hunt them down. The group runs, and for Rick, the only escape is to play mannequin, but that doesn't last long. He then finds a nitrogen tank among the debris, and his luck begins to change. Spotting his friends next to a catapult, he shouts for them to prepare the trap. When the Allosaurus comes running with its mouth open, they throw the tank down its throat. The beast freezes in a few seconds and explodes, revealing that the tachyon amplifier had been in its stomach all along. It is at this moment that a pterodactyl flies by and grabs the machine away. Defeated, Rick gives up trying and even Holly's pleas do not sway him. That night, he thinks better about it and decides to express his regret through a song, not noticing the giant insect sucking on his back, leaving the others scared. The next day, the gang faces the tough climb to the pterodactyl's nest. Once up there, they discover that the amplifier is playing music among all the eggs. Furthermore, the only way to reach it is through a thin layer of volcanic glass. Rick risks the crossing and manages to grab the machine, but this causes the music to stop. All the eggs start to open at the same time, and Holly states that it had been functioning like a lullaby. Cornered at the mouth of the volcano, Rick begins to sing the same song in hopes of calming the newborns. Surprisingly, the plan works, and even Shaka shows off his musical talents. The group celebrates their rare victory with a local drink. It is only after Will and Rick take several gulps that Shaka explains the list of dramatic effects of the drink. Meanwhile, Holly wanders with the amplifier and follows the signal until a passage opens for her. On the other side is an impressive cave filled with crystals, where she takes the opportunity to grab what appears to be a dinosaur egg. Suddenly, a holographic message begins to play. She grows frightened when Zarn appears, but sees that he is simply warning the peoples of the universe about the danger. The one truly attacking other planets with the power of the crystals is Enik. Zarn doesn't manage to give the entire warning before Enik reaches him with a deadly ray. Holly then realizes that the images are coming from Zarn's own crystal, whose body is still there. She says she needs to warn the others, but as soon as she turns her back, a Sleetstack soldier comes to capture her. Many hours later, the others wake up and realize that Holly has been taken. Arriving at the crystal cave, they hide upon seeing two Sleetstacks a little further away. Initially, they think it is a pair of sentinels guarding their leader, but it soon becomes clear that it is a romantic encounter. As part of the ritual, the couple sheds their skins, giving the intruders a golden opportunity. Will and Rick dress up as Sleetstacks and infiltrate the upper tier of the guard, doing their best not to give themselves away. Holly is trapped in a cage, accused of being an accomplice of Enik. Upon hearing this, Rick removes his disguise and proclaims that Enik is his friend, ignoring Holly's signals for him to be quiet. The judge's voice begins to list Enik's crimes, and Rick is shocked by the revelation, but it is too late, and the Sleetstacks receive the order to imprison them as well. Rick jumps into the cage and knocks all the guards into the pit with Will's help. He then breaks down the door and frees Holly, earning a kiss as a reward. Will is frustrated that the two waste time on romance at a time like this, and Holly agrees, stating they need to defeat Enik while they still have the element of surprise. The two confess that, unfortunately, this is no longer the case. Unaware of the truth, they sent Shaka to fetch Enik himself and bring him there. The villain arrives laughing, saying he already has everything he needs to devastate several planets, thanks to Rick's machine. He states that he will start with Earth and give full credit to the scientist. Without wasting any more time, Enik leaves, leaving Rick as a present for the Tyrannosaurus. He decides to confront the beast and instructs the others to flee, even calling Holly ugly to convince her to go away. Will says goodbye to his friend and gives him a bag full of fireworks, unable to explain why he hadn't mentioned having them all alone. Rick attempts to use them against the beast, but they are of dubious quality and fail to light. When he drops the lighter, and the Tyrannosaurus steps on it, Holly understands that the stone that started it all is now being formed. Rick risks a pole vault against the opponent, which only makes the dinosaur's job easier, as he falls directly into its mouth. Heartbroken, Holly tells the animal that it has just eaten the brightest man in history. The widowhood awakens her bravery, and she decides to whip the sleet stacks alone. They start to surround her, and Will comes to help, using Shaka as a weapon, but then everyone stops to observe an incredible scene. Rick is not only alive but mounted on the Tyrannosaurus, giving it commands as if he were in a circus. The sleet stacks are easily defeated by their new ally, and Rick refuses to explain how he got out of the animal. He only says that they made peace after the Tyrannosaurus resolved its intestinal issues. In the pyramid, the heroes interrupt the start of Enik's voyage. He begins to fight with Rick until one of the crystals detaches from the base and shatters on the ground. The passage to Earth begins to oscillate, and Enik claims that it is closing forever. Rick then has an idea and replaces the broken crystal with one from Holly's necklace. They run toward the vortex, but Enik grabs Will's leg. This doesn't go as expected, as Will manages to overpower him. Additionally, he tells the others that he prefers to stay there since his life has always been somewhat out of reality. Rick and Holly return safely to Earth and inform Ernie that his boss has gone to a better place. Will himself would say the same, as Shaka takes him to his kingdom and introduces him to the beautiful women there. A year later, Rick finds himself once again on Matt Lauer's show couch, but the situation is completely different this time. With the dinosaur egg Holly brought, he proved his theories to the world and was finally accepted by the scientific community. Rick even managed to score a bestseller titled Take That, Matt Lauer. Forced by the network to read the title on air, the journalist cannot withstand the provocation and lunges at his guest. Hours later, an assistant finds the egg, left behind on the filming set, and places it in a mug. No one is around to witness when the shell cracks open, revealing the head of a sleet stack.